This is CW Wrestling Talk here, coming off of Extreme Rules, post Extreme Rules week, um, coming off of Monday Night Raw, and essentially the latter part of the week here. Um, and I feel we don't have a whole lot to talk about right now. Um, Not necessarily that that's a I don't mean that in a totally bad way, but um, I think I think Extreme Rules did, kind of conclude, the results of Extreme Rules did, conclude some things and perhaps began others, but, um, for example, the whole Brock Lesnar and Triple H feud, I think now is sort of over. Um, the Shield are now champions. You know, every, you know, Everyone kind of talked about that stuff right now, and as we're transitioning into the summer months, rather quickly, there's there's just not a whole lot to talk about at the moment. There's some guys taking off, and I there's some new feuds to build. So I think there's somewhat of a process in those things. Um, But yeah, as I said, this week on Raw featured, some several absences. Um, Obviously, first and foremost, John Cena was not present on Raw. I guess the way they had the match between him and Ryback ended Extreme Rules. Um, it gave John Cena a way to, have off the next day, way to kind of pull him out of Raw. So that was, it made sense then, I guess, the next day that John Cena wasn't present. Yes, they pulled him out of Raw, essentially. I guess it gave him a good reason to. Um, now, now it was in the beginning of Raw, of course, it was set up that, Ryback made the challenge um, to John Cena, and once again, Ryback sporting some new attire there. I guess that you know wearing like a sort of a Harley vest, and it's like soon with this new gear, they could do sort of like a fashion show or something with them. And same with John Cena and the several different shirts that he comes out with nowadays to the ring. So they could do a Ryback and Cena fashion show if they wanted to. But anyhow, they're going to do an ambulance match at Payback in a few weeks, as that was the sirens hit from the ambulance, and I heard some people joking about this. Some people were thinking, "Oh man, here comes Scott Steiner," and of course that didn't happen, and it's probably not very likely to happen at this point, anyways. But um, it was the ambulance that came out, of course, and Ryback coming out of the ambulance and standing atop of it, and I think it was a decent way to start Monday Night Raw, and good to have Ryback with the opening promo, um, posing a good challenge to John Cena, an ambulance match for a rematch. Um, that I agree with that. That sounds good to me. It sounds like a plan. Um, I criticized the ending. I mean, I didn't criticize them for making it like a draw, essentially. I just criticized the way that, in the last man standing match, how they just didn't count it. They didn't count to 10. I would have at least, it would have at least made it look more legitimate if they counted 10 instead of like, okay, this is where we end it, but we're not really going to say anything. We're just going to put John Cena on a stretcher and, you know, have Ryback walk off and kind of not pay attention to him. So, it was a bit of a. I didn't totally like that, but I understand that WWE wanted to set up a rematch, and that's what they're going to do at Payback, and an ambulance match. Um, I think it sounds like a plan to me.
I agree.
So, with that in mind, we'll wait and see. Um, I would expect Cena to be on Raw next week. So it'll be interesting to see, I guess, what they do then. Um, Triple H was part of the show, and Brock Lesnar was not. Um, I think the the idea here was that Triple H was kind of like he was playing up, the battle that he had with Brock Lesnar. He was kind of playing him up like, hey, I may have lost, but I was in the ring with Brock Lesnar, etc. So I think the heat is now kind of gone between the two, and I think the whole Brock Lesnar now it looks like he's going to be off for a while, um, until they want to get put him in another feud. They had the knee injury thing in the middle of the match that I guess is kind of a good way to write him off. So I think he's done for a little while, and I think the whole thing between Triple H and Brock Lesnar is now officially done too. So I think we're done, as Brock Lesnar said a few weeks ago after destroying Triple H's office in pretty pretty funny fashion. So, but the interesting part of this night was Paul Heyman revealing who the next Paul Heyman guy is, as he kind of touted. And um, this it interested me, like who this would be. But I got to be honest, when Michael McGillicuddy came out, as we thought when we first see him, now named Kurt Axel. um, I mean, I wasn't. Some people, I don't know, maybe some internet fans were really hyped up about this. Um, Now, I wasn't really disappointed about this or anything. I wasn't hyped up about it either. Um, I think this is going to be a thing where we're going to have to wait and see how it goes. I wasn't sure if maybe it was going to be a guy that has been on the show consistently, but like it would have been neat to see like Wade Barrett be the Paul Heyman guy, or something like that. As I think he could definitely use a bigger push, as I've said for months now. And unfortunately, he's still kind of stuck in that mid card range when he could definitely benefit from a guy like Paul Heyman. But this Kurt Axel now, it's gonna have to be one of those things where we have to wait and see how it goes. It's as simple as that. I mean, again, I wasn't extremely hyped when he came out, and I wasn't extremely against it. I'm leaving my mind open, and I'm gonna wait and see um, how him and Paul Heyman both do. I mean, Paul Heyman does a good job, it seems, regardless. But we'll see how Kurt Axel performs in the ring and on his own in the mic, and just how legitimate that WWE can make him. So that's the bottom line there. And of course, the main event featured him against Triple H, as Triple H against the Doctor's will, um, was eager to compete, and he did for a little. But then of course, he was outside the ring, and it seemed like he was like suffering from exhaustion or something. Um, I mean, he was crawling around the ring, crawling around the outside, and trying to get up, and it seemed like he was like having trouble breathing. And so I guess it's sort of a way to write Triple H off, um, for a little. Um, I guess it's like a way to, you know, it reminds me of the beginning of Rocky Five, when you know Rocky is not every. I know not everybody's seen the movie, but when you're me, you've seen them all. So, um, but anyhow, I mean, it reminds me of the beginning of Rocky Five, where like Rocky suffered severe brain trauma after fighting in Rocky Four, the Russian Ivan Drago. Um, and like his hand, he's having, his hands are shaking, and he's having trouble, throughout his boxing career, and especially after getting in the ring with this heavy hitter Ivan Drago, and then he ends up retiring. So, and of course, later on he ends up getting in a street fight anyways with his trainee. But but the bottom line here is that it might be one of these things where it maybe really pushes um, the question of whether or not is Triple H really going to retire now or whatever. Um, and I would expect that down the road he would every now and we may still see him compete in the future, but perhaps to even a lesser degree than we do now. Um, every a few pay-per-views a year might end up going to you know a match every couple of years, or I don't know, but there was it was an interesting ending. Certainly, um, Triple H, it seemed like he was having trouble. So we'll have to wait and see what goes on. The word we get in the future on this. But that's pretty much that. Furthermore, Orton beat he punted Big Show at Extreme Rules, and essentially I think that also wrote Big Show off as he wasn't on Raw. And I think it was a good, a proper way to, I guess, to write him off and perhaps give him some vacation time, as I think that was another. It seems like he was pulled out of Raw too, and perhaps in the near future. As Tiger Woods would say recently in his interesting his golf rivalry with Sergio Garcia. Um, but anyhow, so it seems like it seems like there's now it's now a time for new directions with some guys. Unfortunately, it appears Del Rio is now the number one contender for against Dolph Ziggler. Um, so that's unfortunate. To me, it's time to see somebody other than Del Rio in the title picture, as it seems like for the past couple of years, Del Rio has been in a WWE or World Championship match at seemingly almost every pay per view, it seems. So it's time to move on from that. Now, the Shield, I think they'll just continue to dominate. I think for now, while Team Hell No is beginning to show signs of their breakup coming down the road. Daniel Bryan was frustrated and with Kane, and they weren't getting along too well. So I guess we'll just wait and see how things play out the next couple, next week or next few weeks, and see if they end up, kind of renewing that rivalry they had before they became Team Hell No, and then perhaps we'll see them face it Payback, or I don't know, but it's looking like it could be, um, their dissension now, and other than that, Mark Henry, another guy who they were showing him, I think after Extreme Rules or whatever, people were asking him where he was going, and he was saying he was going home. So I guess uh, you know, I guess he was kind of pulled out of the show too, and perhaps he's going to be taking some time off again. So um, that's pretty much that. Again, it's just we'll see what direction now they go in with Sheamus and Orton now that both of their two guys are, you know, seem to be done for a little bit, I guess. So, it'll be interesting to see what builds up to Payback, what kind of feuds they get together. Um, so that's that. Same old crap with Fandango and some of the people like that, but other than that, just not a whole lot of big stuff to talk about right now. As this relatively shorter edition of TW Wrestling Talk would illustrate. But for now, that is that's all I got. So we'll wait and see what happens with SmackDown tonight, Raw, in a few days, and see how things go as over the Memorial Day weekend, and as things as we start to transition into the summer. I already am kind of transitioning into the summer, if you ask me, but not not in any way like that, but I pretty much wrapped up my college work and everything along those lines, so I'm living the summer right now, and I'm definitely hoping that WWE this summer will hopefully not have too much of a disappointing summer like it kind of did last summer, if you ask me. It's known as a time where WWE the writers are burnt out and whatever, but to me that's not the point. And hopefully they hopefully the summer will be will feature some great feuds and great matches. Whether or not that they do, that remains to be seen. But we will stay watching and see, essentially. So with that in mind, thanks for tuning in this edition of TW Wrestling Talk. Um, and the next edition that drops in will be the 1 year anniversary of the beginning of TW Wrestling Talk. So I encourage you to tune into that, as we will celebrate that. So stay tuned.